Before we get into today's show, I want to tell you about a new offering from MD Coaches. Group coaching for physicians is a small, virtual, confidential cohort designed to inspire participants to rediscover personal and professional fulfillment. The next cohort begins on Thursday, October 6th, and runs weekly until November 10th. And you can earn 1 CME credit per session, totaling 6 credits in all. To learn more and to register, visit www.mdcoaches.store. Space is limited, so be sure and register today.
I mean, in the UK, there's a term that we use for the way that we were taught. Certainly, when I was coming through as a student and a junior doctor, teaching by ritual humiliation.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. And don't forget, CME credit is available when you listen with us. Just look for CMify in the show notes to learn how. My guest today is speaking with us from the UK, where he is a family physician, lawyer, and leadership coach. He has a special interest in workplace bullying. So let's hear my conversation with Dr. Adam Harrison. And it is my great pleasure to be speaking today with Dr. Adam Harrison, who is coming to us from the UK. Adam, it's a great pleasure to have you on the show, and you are our first international guest. Thanks so much for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Randy, for having me. It was an honor anyway until you mentioned that I'm your first international guest, so I'm even more privileged. I recently did a guested on a podcast where I was the first male guest on a female-only guest podcast.
Wow.
So I'm chalking up some amazing firsts at the moment. So
yeah,
thank you.
That's quite a big deal.
Absolutely.
Well, Adam, as we always do, I want to begin at the beginning, and I'm interested to know when you first thought that you would have an interest in studying medicine and sort of the influencers that came into your life that brought you there.
Yes. So I think when I was around 13, I was interested in either veterinary medicine or human medicine. And it was when I did some work experience through my school when I was around 15, I think, at a local general hospital. And I spent 2 weeks at this hospital, mostly on a ward with orthopedic patients. And then I had a day in the ER. And I was just absolutely hooked. I was hugely inspired by the junior doctors that I was working with, and that was it. That kind of sealed the deal for me into human medicine rather than veterinary medicine.
So there were no medical types in your family that had an influence, or anything
no,
like that?
not at all. I was the first person in the family to actually go to university at all, and all I can say is that I was at school with friends who had doctors as parents, and if I went round to their house, to socialise, then I might meet the parents and talk to them a bit. And my mum worked in a family medicine clinic as receptionist and sort of healthcare assistant, and I met a few of the family physicians there, but nothing kind of close enough contact, I think, for them to have had a huge influence on me. So yeah, I don't really know where it came from.
I see. Well, that's an interesting story. And Adam, one thing I would like for you to do, our audience is largely in the U.S., of course, and we do medical education and professional education in general a little differently from what you do in the UK. Would you mind telling us how that goes?
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the steps in the
process?
process?
Of course, yeah. And I'm really familiar with the American system because I work with a lot of American physicians. Most of my clients are actually based in the USA. I have one in Canada at the moment. So I'm really conversant with the US system, but I find it very, very interesting. So you know how you guys go to get a college degree first and then do medicine as a graduate subject, really. In the UK, the sort of standard route is that you finish high school when you're 18, and that's when you've done what we call A levels, so advanced levels subjects for the preceding 2 years, and they are almost like your university entrance exams. I mean, there isn't much use for them otherwise. And it's narrowed down quite a lot. So when you do your exams at 16, you're kind of your general high school exams, and some people leave school at that stage. You do about 10 or 12 different subjects, but when you're doing your A levels in the ages of 16, 17, 18, you really narrow it down to 3 or 4 subjects. So in my case, I did biology, chemistry, and physics, and a subject called general studies. And then so the general process is that you apply to medical school, and there are some standalone medical schools, and there are some most medical schools are faculties of medicine of bigger universities. Okay, around 17 at the beginning of your final year of high school, and you fill out the application forms and you go through the interview procedures if you get offered interviews, and then if you get offered a place and you get the grades that they ask you to get, then you'll start medical school at the age of 18, and it's generally a 5-year course. So you could actually qualify as a doctor at the age of 23. Quite a few of us, especially I trained down in London, quite a few of us down there do an extra year called an intercalated year to get an extra degree. Because the first 2 years are very much like your first 2 years, as far as I know. So a lot of, basic medical sciences, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry, pharmacology, etc., etc. So the way it's looked at here is that the first 2 years are more than the equivalent of the first 2 years of, say, a biochemistry degree or a biology degree or something like that. So if you do an extra year, you then get given a Bachelor of Science degree as well. So I actually studied history of medicine for a year and qualified with a degree in history of medicine, and obviously my medical degree at the end of it as well. So that's how it generally works and how it worked for me.
That's really interesting. And I'd be interested to know if you, at any time throughout your career, felt that study of the history of medicine really informed your medical practice in any way.
That's a really good question. I'm not sure consciously it did. I mean, much like in the US and the working systems, although the overarching kind of funding of hospitals and things is quite different in the US than it is in the UK, but the kind of the work, the kind of being on the wards and going to the ER to review patients and going to the OR and etc. is very similar. And I mean, you remember what it's like when you're an intern and a junior resident. You're so busy just kind of doing your work and trying to get some rest. There isn't much time to kind of think about all the interesting things that you might have studied. We often talk about doctors kind of getting on this conveyor belt and your identity changes and becomes, you become a medic or a physician, and all the interesting things that you did to get noticed by the medical schools to be offered a place, like, art and theatre and music and sport to a high level, and all these things that we did to make our applications look more interesting than our competitors. You just leave them behind when you start as an intern and a junior resident, because you're just so busy with work. So probably I would say it's hard to think of how the history of medicine, impacted on my work as a junior doctor. What I will say is that it was my favorite year at medical school. It was my best year at medical school. It made me feel like I had that second chance to study a humanity, because I really did pigeonhole myself quite tightly into the three sciences at A level, and I think it just reflected the kind of person and interest that I had generally, because, and we'll come to this later on, but I ended up studying to become a lawyer and pass the bar exams and so on. So I then ended up doing, the social sciences in the form of law. So I think I always had that, humanities, artistic, social science side to my personality as well.
And was there additional training that was required in order for you to become what we would call a general practitioner or a family medicine physician?
Yeah, I actually think it's, I have friends in different countries, and I think it's quite rigorous in the UK. In that I know in some parts of mainland Europe, for example, you can just do a couple of years as a junior doctor in a hospital, and then you can go off and I think probably do about a year as like an apprentice family physician, and then you can be a family physician essentially. In the UK, you have to do the first 2 years, so essentially like the equivalent of an intern year and like a first year of residency, and then you have to start what we call general practice here, so a family medicine residency program, which consists of at least 12 months in family medicine, and then the rest will be various hospital jobs of use to family medicine, like pediatrics and psychiatry and ER and obstetrics and things like that, so you're looking at a minimum of 5 years after you graduate as a doctor before you can start working as a family physician in the UK.
It's very interesting. It sounds like a little bit of a different roadmap, but yet it accomplishes the same purpose, if you will, as to what we experience in the U.S.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
But let's move the story along. Once you're fully trained, you actually spend some time practicing family medicine, right?
I did, yeah. So in fact, my route was a little bit more circuitous in that when I was at medical school, I really, story of my life, I really enjoyed histopathology, and I was quite heavily leaning towards doing forensic pathology for a career. Yeah, that was my original career intention.
I didn't pick that up when I was snooping around in your life, but that's a fascinating story.
I have so many versions of my resume and CV that you probably got one that may not even have mentioned that, because it may not have been relevant to that particular job I was applying for. So yeah. Yeah. So I did start. What a lot of doctors do in the UK, especially kind of 20 years ago when I was kind of coming out of training. I graduated in 2000. A lot of us will do what we call house jobs, your house office jobs, or your internship, where you at that time you would do 6 months of adult medicine and 6 months of surgical jobs. And then a lot of people then go and do ER for 6 months, because it was just a really good general job to do. And also, while you're making your mind up what you want to do, whether you want to apply for surgical training or pediatrics or psychiatry or whatever. So I did that, like most of us did, and then I had my histopathology jobs to go to, which I did, and that's when I moved from London up to Nottingham, where I'm speaking to you from now, and it just the training didn't go how I had wanted it to go or had hoped it would go. So after 6 months, I moved on from that, and I decided that, of all the things I would like to do, if I wasn't going to be a histopathologist or forensic histopathologist, it was going to be surgery of some description. And this bit I'm not entirely sure in the US. So if you want to be an orthopedic surgeon in the US, you basically do a whole orthopedic residency. Am I right?
That's correct. Yeah, you have to take some. You would probably
so in the UK,
a surgical internship year and maybe an additional year in general surgery before you would start your orthopedics training. But that's basically how it goes. Yeah.
Okay, right, yeah. So the first part of the postgraduate exams that you do in for your surgical discipline actually require you to do lots of different jobs. So I, for example, did cardiothoracic surgery, I did trauma orthopedics, I did general breast and ped surgery, I did pediatric urology. So I did all these different jobs, and they kind of give you that experience of being mentored by different people and cutting in different ways, and set you up for the exam quite nicely, because the first part of the exam is more general. And then when you pass the exam, that's when you go into your specialty surgical training. So, if you want to be a cardiothoracic surgeon, you just spend the next 5 years just doing cardiothoracics as a resident. So I did all these various jobs, and I'm not sure if we're going to come back to this later, but I had there was always someone there was someone senior to me in every job and attending that essentially kind of picked on me at work, whether they shamed me or berated me or undermined me or monitored me or whatever it was, gaslit. I had the whole smorgasbord of different types of workplace aggression leveled against me.
Are you particularly speaking about people at a very slightly more advanced level of training than you, or are you talking about the professors and the leaders of the profession?
Yeah, the latter. Yeah, so
or both.
No, the
latter.
The kind of senior attendings and professors and so on. Yeah. It was always them.
That must have been demoralizing.
Yeah, I guess. Someone actually asked me the other day on another interview, why did I kind of stick with it? And I think what happens is because you have to do these postgraduate exams, these member of the Royal College of Surgeons exams, and you pay a lot of money to do them. And you do your part one, and then there's a part two, and then there's the clinical parts to the exam. And you get so far into it, and you've invested so much money and so much time, you just think, I can't walk away now. I'm more than halfway through. It's going to be a waste of all my time, a waste of all this money. I at least need to get the exam and walk away with the exam and have something to show for all of this, awful treatment I've experienced. So I think that's also
it's a bit of inertia.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not a quitter, and there's also that thing about doctors, not kind of not wanting to show any weakness, and we're all perfectionists, and if we kind of don't carry on and do something to the end, we're letting ourselves down, we're letting our family down, etc., etc. So I think there's just this also, I think, within medicine, this culture of everyone has to go through it. You just tolerate it. It's just a rite of passage, a baptism of fire. And in the UK, there's a term that we use for the way that we were taught. Certainly, when I was coming through as a student and a junior doctor, teaching by ritual humiliation. And I think it's a bit like the concept of pimping that I've heard of. I hadn't heard of pimping until I started working with American physicians, but it sounds, like a bit like that, to be honest. Very sort of aggressive questioning and then shaming you when you get it wrong.
Mm-hmm. It sounds very much like the experience in the UK is very like what we experience in the U.S. So, and that's a bit of a surprise to me. I thought we were somewhat unique on this side of the pond, if you will, but apparently that's not the case.
Well, I mean, I don't want to digress too much, but we a year ago we got back from 2 years away in Australia and New Zealand, and I found from my wife's experience, she was a fellow in Australia, that actually the system in Australia that is even more aggressive than in the UK. So it's pretty much across the world of Western medicine. You know, the Western medical tradition. It's just a thing. You know, but yeah. Anyway, so I kind of worked my way through these various surgical jobs to get my exam, so that then I could say, actually, you know what, I was looking around thinking, I don't want to work with these attendings, I don't want to be their immediate colleague in, 5 or 10 years time. I need to get out of this specialty. And so that's when I thought, well, okay, if I'm not going to do histopathology and I'm not going to do surgery, what else am I going to do? What do I enjoy? And I think really I reflected, and I enjoyed everything at medical school. I enjoyed all of my placements. So it wasn't really much of a decision and much of a stretch to go into family medicine, because obviously you're looking after all patients from cradle to grave. So I thought, family medicine, that's they're generally seen to be quite nice, friendly, touchy-feely people, and I again, I think I just made another bad decision, because the thing about family physicians in the UK is that there are really, I suppose, 3 types. There's what we call GP partners, so general practice partners. Then there are salaried doctors. Then there are locum doctors, essentially locum tenens doctors, and the partners actually own the clinics. Or at least they own the business. They may rent the premises, but they own the business, and they subcontract their services back to the National Health Service. So they get money from the government. They get so much money per head of patient, and they have to use that money, and in a business like way, to make some profit for themselves. And yeah, I just underestimated, I think, how cutthroat some of them can be. So it was another kind of challenging, kind of career pathway to go down, really. I think one of my problems, for want of a better word, is that I'm very kind of, and I've only realized this in the last few years, but I'm very sort of principled and values driven, and if I saw something that I thought was, unjust or inequitable or whatever, be it affecting me or a colleague, I just can't stand by and let these things happen. I have to put my head above the parapet and say that's unfair. And I now realize that I was basically putting a target on my back throughout the entirety of my junior medical career, because I was willing to speak up. I had the confidence to do that when others didn't. But it obviously got me into a lot of trouble. So yeah, that was, my last foray into clinical medicine for a while before I went to do my law studies. So
yeah, I can I can really empathize with you in that frame of mind. And again, it sounds as if the training in medicine and the practice of medicine in the UK is apparently not so terribly different from what we see here in the US, and that's an eye opener for me. I was really not I was not aware of that. So, and I'll bet we could do a half dozen episodes about exactly the subject that we're talking about right now, but we don't have quite that long. So I am curious how that feeling that you were obviously struggling with at that point led you to think that the study of law would get you into a better place?
Yeah. So what happened was, I think I was. I think there were a few reasons that I was unhappy as a trainee family physician. I certainly burnt out, probably for the second time. I think I burnt out at least once, if not a couple of times, during my family medicine residency. I had certainly burnt out at least once during my surgical residency jobs. So that certainly affected me, and part of that I attribute part of that to the extreme patient expectations in the clinic that I was working. I was working in a very gritty inner city practice, and the patients were very demanding and kind of high volume users, and lots of deprivation, so lots kind of substance misuse and kind of illnesses arising out of smoking and bad diet and lack of exercise and all these sorts of things. And it was just an extremely tough job. And yeah, so I think I was feeling overwhelmed quite a lot. I was burnt out. I was not enjoying the working in the demographic that I was working with at that time. And really, while I was still kind of finishing off my family medicine residency, I was already looking out for other things that I could do once I had got my family medicine qualifications. I obviously mentioned before about forensic pathology, so I'd always had this fascination with the interface between medicine and law. And so I thought, well, if I'm not going to be, the kind of the Quincy, if you like, character and kind of diagnosing the cause of death, and dealing with kind of the cadavers from violent crimes and things like that. If I'm not going to do that, then what else is kind of medico legally related? And we have organisations in the UK called medical defence organisations. And essentially what you do is, as doctors, you pay subscription to these organisations. They're a bit more than just insurers. They don't kind of just cover you if someone makes a medical negligence claim against you and they're successful. Obviously, if that happens, then they will pay out for you because it's like an insurance policy. But they also do other things, like if you have complaints made against you, they help you draft your responses to the complaints to help them kind of go away more quickly and not escalate into anything else. Because you can imagine when doctors have a complaint against them, they take it really, really personally and they get extremely defensive. And if you let a doctor just write their own response to a complaint letter, it would get them into a whole heap more trouble, essentially. So you pay your subscriptions to these defense bodies, and they help you kind of stay out of trouble and things go away as quickly as possible. And then there's also things with the medical board. So I know that all of your different states in the US have their own medical boards. We just have one called the General Medical Council, the GMC, in the UK. So the GMC is responsible for regulation and discipline of the profession. But they can take you to a tribunal called the Medical Professionals Tribunal Service, and this is where you can be suspended or erased from the medical register and things like this. So it's a big deal. So again, these defence organisations, they help you with any representation that you require at any General Medical Council proceedings. So a really fascinating job. But when the cases got really interesting, because they take a bunch of doctors and they train you up to be like baby lawyers, but you haven't got any legal qualifications. They just kind of put you through some training for about 10 weeks, and then that's it. You're kind of like fending for yourself, essentially. And then often you have to approach the legal team in the organisation and say, "Oh, now we need you because I've gone as far as I can go with this case. And I got quite frustrated at that. I think I'm a bit of a completer finisher. And I was, like, I want to be doing that side of things. I want to be doing the legal side and sorting things out properly. So that's, I think, was what the motivation was for me to study law, get my law degree, and then sit and pass the bar exams.
Did you find any satisfaction at all in that?
It's an interesting story without perhaps a satisfying ending. So when I passed the bar, which was in October 2014, we'd had our first child about 14 months before, and my wife is an attending maxillofacial surgeon. But at that time, she was a resident, like a senior resident, in maxillofacial surgery. And in the UK, and again, this is something that's different in the US, because I actually coach a maxillofacial surgeon in the US. But in the UK, you actually have to be dual qualified and do a dental degree and a medical degree to become a maxillofacial surgeon. So my wife had been through like 10 years of kind of, undergrad, graduate school, all of this, and then all of her, intern years and residency training and all of this. And it just seemed like, well, we were at a junction really, I can pursue my legal career, but starting from the very bottom rung as essentially a trainee in a law firm. Or my wife, who was, kind of almost within touching distance of her attending position, could carry on her very well delineated career trajectory and qualify. And it just didn't seem right for me to say, okay, I'm going to pursue my legal dream, as it were, and for her to, give up on her career dream. And the reason that we kind of had this discussion is that we were always of the frame of mind that we wanted to raise our own children. We had friends who, couples who were both doctors and so on, who had both had high flying careers, and then they had a nanny or an au pair or whatever, raising their children, which is completely fine. That's people's choice. If that's what they want to do, that's, we're not judging anyone, but we didn't want to do that. We wanted to raise our own children. We wanted to have that relationship with our own kids. So for us, it was a case of, well, you know what? I'm only just starting in the law. I'll take a step back. You run with your career. I'll kind of help with the childcare, and I'll figure it out. I'll sort something out so that I'm not kind of wasting all of these qualifications. And what ended up happening was that it was great for a year or so. I had a whole day a week, like every Monday I had with my with our daughter, our young daughter, and then I worked 4 days of the week. I did the occasional weekend shift, but I started putting myself out there as a medical legal advisor to local organizations. And I got offered some work. I got co-opted onto committees, and then I got, kind of asked if I wanted to be a director on the board of committees. And then an NHS body fairly local to me wanted to use me to work on the discipline and regulatory side of family physicians. And so I started completely inadvertently carving out this medical leadership career, which I absolutely love. So I had a beautiful, what we call portfolio career in the UK. I had, had some part-time leadership roles. I did a bit of clinical work. I had some educator roles, and some advisory work. And it was a lovely, lovely time of my life. It was probably, when my career was at its zenith as far as I'm concerned.
Hi, I'm Rhonda Crow, founder and CEO for MD Coaches. Here on RX for Success, we interview a lot of great medical professionals on how they grew their careers, how they overcame challenges, and how they handle day-to-day work. I really hope you're getting a lot of great information. But if you're looking for an answer to a specific problem, management or administration challenge, or if you're feeling just a bit burnt out, like maybe you chose the wrong career, well, then there's a faster way to get the help you need. No, it's not counseling, it's coaching. RX for Success is produced by MD Coaches, a team of physicians who have been where you are. I know you're used to going it alone, but you don't have to. Get the support you need today. Visit us at mymdcoaches.com to schedule your complimentary consultation. Again, that's mymdcoaches.com, because you're not in this alone.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now I want to tell you a little bit about Physician Outlook. If you haven't discovered this remarkable magazine, please do so very soon. It was created by physicians, for physicians, to showcase the intersection between clinical and non-clinical interests, whether it's writing, painting, cooking, politics, and dozens of other topics. Physician Outlook gives a physician perspective. It's available online and in print. It's really unique among physician lifestyle magazines. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook amplifies the voice of any physician who has something to say. It also engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get 3 months free when you enter our promo code RX for Success and select the monthly option at checkout. That's a really great deal on this stunning publication. And now let's get back to today's interview. I'd like to hear a little bit about how you actualized or formalized that process and got yourself into the position that you're in now, and how are you liking it?
I'm one of the. I think a lot of doctors are like this. So I mentioned my wife's fellowship in Australia, and we all left as a family in July 2019 and moved to Darwin, ostensibly for just 12 months. But then the pandemic came along about 8 months later, and they shut down all the interstate borders in Australia. And we were in the Northern Territory. We were in Darwin in the Northern Territory, and it's probably the smallest territory / state in terms of absolute population, but the biggest proportion of Indigenous people. So they had a lot of Indigenous communities, a lot of Aboriginal Indigenous communities scattered around. A lot of them very, very, flights away from a tertiary hospital center, a trauma center, somewhere with an ICU. So you can imagine if the virus had got into one of these communities, these small townships with 3,000 to 4,000 people, it could have wiped out an entire generation of Indigenous people. And there were so many different varieties of Indigenous people, different tribes and so on, that it could have conceivably seen the end of certain tribes. So they were very, very vigilant. That's something they did really well. But it meant you couldn't fly in or out of the state, let alone internationally, which was great for us because we were watching what was going on in the UK with horror and just being so fearful for our families back home. But we were in absolute safety. There was nothing. There was they made a thing about kind of social distancing and sanitizing and wearing masks and all of this sort of stuff, but there was no virus there. It was just for practice, I guess. So it was fantastic, but obviously we ended up staying there for 18 months, and then and this was getting towards December 2020 when we were supposed to be going back to the UK, 6 months late, and things were still looking pretty bad in the UK. Boris Johnson was all set to let everyone mingle for Christmas, and the levels were, the third wave was coming, and all of this. And I'm asplenic. I had my spleen removed when I was 6 because I have hereditary spherocytosis. So I was like, and this was before the vaccine, of course. So I was like looking realistically down the barrel of having to self-isolate for 12 weeks and not see my children and my wife for 12 weeks. So it's like, this is not an option. So she actually got offered a locum tenens consultant attending post in New Zealand. So we went there. But what happened was we had to get out because my wife was being bullied by her attendings in the hospital there, and she was unhappy, and I was I've deviated a little bit. That I was going to say originally, being a good medic, you don't feel like you can let the grass grow under your feet. You feel like you have to be achieving something all the time, and I thought, well, if my wife's getting a fellowship out of this year overseas, then I want to get something out of it too. And that's when I decided I was going to do my coach training. But I was also doing some work for the local medical school, and I was tutoring Indigenous medical students. And I had a few of them come to me and tell me that they were being picked on and bullied and shamed on the wards by the doctors who they were working with. And it just brought everything flooding back for me from the days when I was experiencing it. And it was really then that I decided that I had to use I was a qualified life leadership and executive coach in the end. And I just, I thought I have to use my powers for good. I like to use the superhero analogy. It's like, I've got to use my powers for good. I've got to use my coaching skills for good. And do what I can do to help people who have been in this position where they're being bullied by their seniors in healthcare in the way that I had been. So yeah, that was really when I, it started my kind of where I am currently. Was started in its embryonic form, and I was like, okay, so what can I do realistically as a coach to help people who've experienced, physicians who've experienced bullying in the workplace. And that's when my ideas started to formulate.
And I'm really fascinated with what appears to be the finish line for you, and that is not only did you want to focus on where the demoralizing forces are coming in the medical profession, but you chose to focus largely upon the experience for women, which I gather that you identified that everybody was being bullied, but it was perhaps a little more intense for the women. Am I overreading that?
No, you're spot on. Actually, all of my tutees at the medical school in Darwin were female, and I with my wife's experience, and their experiences, and my wife is actually British Pakistani. Her father moved from Pakistan to the UK in the late 1960s, so she was born in the UK. But so she was. I was telling you about how things were, seemingly a bit worse in Australia than in the UK, and we were trying to unpick it. Was it because she was female? Because there's a decent amount of misogyny in medicine there as well. Was it because she was a woman of color? And I was thinking a lot about this with my tutees. They were female, they were women of color, they were Indigenous women, and they all pretty much most of them had children already as well. And so there were still people there in Australia who were saying, you don't deserve to be here. You don't have a place here. What are you doing? You've got children. You're wasting your time. This kind of stuff. And yeah, it just made me think about how fortunate I had been with the female influences in my life. So I a very strong yet compassionate mother, two very, very strong and loving sisters, younger sisters, my wife, who is forever an inspiration to me, who I keep trying to get as a guest on my podcast. Inspiring Women Leaders, it's called. And I'd worked with so many incredible female medical leaders, and also it'd come across like coaching leaders as well, women who were just so incredibly impressive, inspiring, that I just thought I need to, there's too much good learning here not to kind of harness it in some vehicle. And at first my thoughts were I'll put on a conference, like an Inspiring Women Leaders conference. And then I thought, well, actually, that's too small, because that's just a one-off. You do the conference and then it's forgotten about, But if you create a podcast like yours, you then have this body of work, you have a legacy, you have something that's a resource that people can just keep dipping in and out of for years to come. It's not, kind of over and done with in an afternoon at a conference. And I just thought I have to share this learning. I'm a huge advocate of kindness in leadership, and so compassionate, servant, and inclusive leadership. And I'd seen that in absolute, bucket loads from the women that I'd worked with. And I thought this has to be kind of, bottled as an essence and shared with the world, for the betterment of future leaders. But, ostensibly, primarily in medicine, so for younger physicians coming through to listen to the podcast and learn from their seniors, but not just for younger female doctors, but also for male doctors, because there are not that many great senior male role models out there. So yeah, that's how. Yeah,
I think you're right onto something very important. It makes a lot of sense for you to recognize the need amongst the women, because they need some place to find the justification for staying with the task and fulfilling the career that they dreamt of. But on the other hand, there is clearly a need to educate and re-educate the male counterparts who are part of the problem. And I'm interested to know if you're making some attempt to do that, and if so, do you think you've made any progress?
In terms of my podcast as a weapon for good, it's fairly early days. I only released episode 4 5 days ago, so it kind of remains to be seen what kind of influence and impact that will have. The people I'm hearing from, the feedback I'm hearing at the moment is almost exclusively from female physicians. But yeah, I think that, there are other means and other modalities that can be used as well. So I'll mention this a bit later on, but I recently spoke at a national health service workforce conference, and I did a talk. I was invited down, and I wanted to talk about workforce retention, because we've got not only huge issues like in the US, with the Great Resignation, but not only huge issues in recruiting replacement doctors and other healthcare professionals, but also in retaining them, keeping them in service. And so my angle was the benefits of kindness in the workplace, and kindness as a tool to help workforce retention. And I think the more, I was speaking in a room of 220 mid-level and senior managers, a lot of whom were in HR. And hopefully, and I've had a few people reach out and say, can I do talks for them in other departments and things. So hopefully, we can just start a bit of a domino effect and actually start planting seeds, and, the word will get out and people will take notice.
Well, perhaps we'll put a pen in the map on this, and we'll follow up with you, if not month to month, maybe year to year, and see how this thing's going. I certainly hope that you, as we say in the U.S., hit a home run with this thing, because what a wonderful thing it would be to really make a difference of this sort. And I have a feeling that you probably will. Adam, we've come to the part of the program where I'm going to back out and be silent and give you a chance to speak to our audience on your own and uninterrupted. So audience, this is Dr. Adam Harrison, who's going to share his personal prescriptions for success.
Thank you, Randy. So when I was composing my thoughts on this, I was thinking about what the various definitions of success are and what they mean to different people. Some people will obviously rate how successful they are on how much they're earning, and there's this other kind of outcome measure, which is on impact, which I feel more in alignment with. So how we all measure success is different, but I like to think that I'll look back on my life at the end and consider myself successful if I feel I've made a positive impact in the world and an impact on some of the people in it. And for me, the recipe for achieving this personal measure of success comprises five little things. Some of them are related to life in general, and some of them are a little bit more worky. But the first one for me is to spend as much time with your loved ones as possible. I believe that no one's epitaph ever read, "I wish I'd spent more time at work." I hope that most people look back on their deathbed and wish that they'd spent more time with their family, or been glad that they spent as much time with their loved ones as they did. So spend as much time with your loved ones as possible. Second one is all around kindness, and all things kindness, really. Being a kind person, being a kind leader. And I mentioned before this talk I did last week on the benefits of kindness in the workplace, and I came across this lovely quote by Rabbi Harold Kushner, who's a rabbi based in the US, and he's quoted as saying, "Do things for people not because of who they are or what they do in return, but because of who you are." And I just think that really, in a nutshell, is a really beautiful way of thinking about kindness, being a kind person and being a kind leader. It's just, not only is kindness good for us, if we practice kindness, it's been shown to be good for your health, and that people who have a kindness practice have greater longevity, but also the impact on others is even more profound when they're on the receiving end of kindness. So it's a simple concept. It's not actually easy to practice kindness if you are not used to doing it, and that is not to say that that's because you're a kind or an unkind person, but actually it takes a lot of confidence to practice kindness and compliment people and include people and so on. So if you're a bit shy, it can be hard to practice kindness, but if you have the right intention and you're willing to put in some practice, then you can be the start of that that trickle that creates the flood. My third one is live, love, and lead by your values, and do work in alignment with your values. So I alluded to this earlier, that one of my core values is justice. The others are honesty, gratitude, love, and humor. And I feel that since I became aware of what my values are a few years ago, that it's transformed the way I live my life. I live my life with a certain intention now, and now, say, most of my work now is self-employed work. I will only do assignments that are in alignment with my core values, and that feels very liberating and very empowering. And I think if you are in a workplace where you feel like you just feel things are not right, there's some kind of like disharmony or disequilibrium between you and your employer, it's probably that there's a malalignment or a misalignment in your values. And it's probably the kind of place that you're not going to get along with for the rest of your career. So worth thinking about your values. The fourth one is be compassionate to yourself as well as others. So when I did this talk last week, it was a face-to-face talk to 220 National Health Service managers and senior managers. And I asked the group to raise their hands if they felt they were regularly overly harsh to themselves. And over half of them in the room raised their hands. So one of my points of advice on as a part of the recipe for success is treat yourself as you treat your best friend. Like you wouldn't be horrible to your best friend, so why be horrible to yourself? Or treat yourself how you would like others to treat your mum or dad or child or spouse. Only then can you really start treating others with that kind of compassion. I think it starts with self, and I think it's kind of behind some of the mental health issues that we're seeing a lot of as well these days. And finally, my fifth point is have a small group of trusted, confidant advisors to turn to and to support them in turn. Recently, I've had a few entrepreneurial hitches and challenges, and it was so valuable to be able to turn to people in the same boat or similar boat as me. A handful of people, and they'll know who they are, really helped me get out of my funk that I was in a few weeks ago, and actually stopped me from quitting what I'm doing. So it's having a group, a small kind of like tribe of people to kind of listen to you and support you and help you is a great way to help you become successful in life, I think. And that's my recipe.
Well, Adam, there's a lot of wisdom there, and I am very grateful that you have taken the time to share that with us. I have come away from this feeling considerably more informed and enlightened, and I'm very grateful that you took the time to stay up so late at night where you are and have a conversation with me. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to tell our audience where they can find you and the things that you do. So I'll give you the floor again.
Thank you. Thanks, Randy. And thank you and Rhonda and the team so much for reaching out and, having me as a guest on your fantastic show. I'm ever so grateful. So yeah, people can email me at dr.adamharrison, all one word, HARRISON @gmail.com. My website is just www.dradamharrison.com, dradamharrison.com. I'm on LinkedIn quite actively as Dr. Adam Harrison. And I would love for people to have a listen to my podcast, which is called Inspiring Women Leaders. It's on the Buzzsprout website. It's on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, and a host of smaller platforms. So please tune in and let me know what you think.
Well, Dr. Adam Harrison, again, I'm so grateful that you have taken the time to be with us today. This has been a great conversation. I have enjoyed every minute of it. So thanks again for taking the time.
No, thank you. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We'd really appreciate a review from you, and a 5-star rating helps give our podcast much more visibility, and that helps us reach more listeners. Exclusive content is available on our Patreon page, including membership-only material like personal rapid-fire Q&A sessions with our guests. To be sure you never miss an episode, visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com to subscribe. And while you're there, learn how to get CME credit from CMify just by listening. Special thanks to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.